Hey everyone, welcome to week 4. I'm going to go do a quick review of what we are going to be covering this week, and then there'll be a separate video that will outline your feature story, which is the next writing assignment that you have. So let's dive right into it. This week you're going to be reading chapters 10 and 17. However, on chapter 17, you only have to read pages 322 to 333, so just about 10 pages. These two chapters, one is like feature stories, and then the other one focuses on profiles. So profiles are feature story. You're going to actually read an example of a profile story, just so we get that distinction and what you understand what you're moving into. Hard news stories, the one that you just did, hard news stories cover things that are like events, or I shouldn't say events, something that's happening in the moment, right? So like we talked about, there's a fire, there's a police chase, there's a, I don't know, I'm trying to think of some other, I don't always think a catastrophe, a sports event, right? So something that's live in the moment, you get one chance to cover it, a parade, right? That's a great example. It's a parade. You're there, you're at the parade, you get that one chance to cover what's going on, and then in a couple hours it's done, or whatever it is. So it's something that is happening in the moment. Feature stories, you have a little bit more time to develop. So maybe you're covering, doing a feature on the University of Hartford. What is the University of Hartford? What kind of students go there? What are they known for, right? So you're doing this overall feature. It's not like you just have to show up in an hour and you have to get everything about the University of Hartford. You have some time to really dive into it. Maybe you're covering it on a nonprofit. Maybe you're covering it on an upcoming event, right? An event that's coming up. So you talk about everything that's going on behind this event, or a band, right? And that goes along the lines of a profile, which we're about to talk about. You do a story on that band. You know, who is that band? What was their backstory? What are they like now? What are they like on tour? Are they married? Do they have kids? Do they, whatever it is, right? So it's more, you're just telling us a story, the overall package. Profiles, specifically profile, they write about someone or something. So the way we're doing profiles are on people, right? So who is this person? Maybe you're doing a profile on that band member, right? That musician, that artist. Maybe you're doing a profile. You could do a profile on me, right? Who is Professor Chiara? You know, where is his background? How do you, what is he like as a teacher? And you do this story on me. So that's really the difference between with feature stories and hard news stories. There is some overlap, and you'll see that in the chapter. There's journalistic overlap, the way that you write the stories. There are a lot of similarities, but that's the big difference. And I think you have a little bit more creativity, a little bit more flexibility when it comes to feature stories. You know, hard news stories, the way they're written, very rigid. And I'm not saying that as a criticism. They're supposed to be that way, but like we talked about, you have your lead, your nut graph, where that key information goes, background, the lead quotes, right? It's very structured. Feature story, you have a little bit more flexibility. You have a little bit more artistic creativity of the way that you want to tell the story. You still have to follow some guidelines, and there's still some journalistic best practices, but you do have a lot more flexibility. Something else with feature stories that are interesting, so public relations, which you just read about, right, and you're doing your exercise. So public relations, which is like an organization, again, to reiterate, it's an organization that has communication professionals that try to project that organization's message. They represent the reputation of the organization or of the person, and they communicate to the news media to let them know when things are happening, right? So public relations use hard news stories usually for like press releases. So let's say the University of Hartford, you're doing public relations for the University of Hartford. You do a press release because there's a new program coming, so you send that to the news media. You write that in a way that's very, very hard news structured, right? It's inverted pyramid. But PR pros also use feature stories. So maybe on their website, they want to highlight a student that's doing fantastic work. So they might write it as like a feature story and put that up on their site, or on a blog, or maybe they even sometimes do feature story for like a magazine or like a newsletter. Like you guys probably, sorry, you're gonna hear my dogs now. You might write a feature story for like a newsletter that you have and highlighting something. So it's used not just in journalism, but it's also used in other aspects of the media like public relations. So that's what chapters 10 and 17 are about, feature stories and profiles. And you're also going to see what I think is a great example of a feature story, and it's really a profile story. And that's this link that I have here. In the army, in the Klan, he hated Muslims. Now he's coming to Chris Buckley's. Now one was coming to Chris Buckley's home. So you'll see it's from the Washington Post. It's long, but I think you'll get into it once you start reading it too. You'll really get into it because it's a story. It's a story about this veteran who became a Klan member, hated Muslims, hated African Americans, the whole thing, and then made a turnaround. And I think it highlights a lot of the stuff, a lot of the techniques and lessons you're going to learn from your chapter about how to tell a good feature and profile story. You're going to see being played out here. So what I would recommend is read the chapter first. Read these chapters first. Get a good understanding of what a feature story is, what a profile story is, what makes a good profile story, and see if you can see those lessons being applied here within this article. Because I think that you're going to see them. I know that you're going to see them being played out here. And I just think it's also just gives you a great example of how feature stories can be written. They all do not have to be written this way, but how they can be written. And I'll just give you an example. I'm going to read the first 3 paragraphs here. You'll see this is not the traditional lead, like in a hard news story. They don't write it as a hard news story because it doesn't have to be. They put a quote up in the second paragraph. You would not do that in a hard news story, usually. They do it here, and it works. So let me just read the first 3 paragraphs just so you get an idea. Chris Buckley walks out on his porch where the doormat once greeted customers at Subway, looks up and down the empty streets. So what do they do here right away? They say his name. You're not supposed to do that in a hard news story or feature story. You can. They don't give you a lot of context, but now you kind of want to start to a little bit know why he's looking down an empty street. I admit I'm nervous, he says, lighting up a cigarette with heavy tattoos. Very compelling, starts to draws in. All right, well, why is this guy nervous? He's looking down an empty street. Why is he nervous? His densely colored arms and much of his body are paisley record of his many hates. KKK symbols dot up his knuckles, surrounds his navel, anti-government militia tag covers his neck. Most prominent is a big word in Arabic emblazoned on the black of his forearm, infidel. Wow, what a great paragraph to describe physically what he looks like. And even just in those few lines, you kind of get, you create this image of him, of who this person is, right? You stereotype in a lot of ways. You start to stereotype, you start to put him in a box, and you kind of get an idea of who he is. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. I want you guys to read it. But you can see how interesting, how much flexibility, creativity, that's what I was saying that you can have on a feature story. You see it being played out, I think, even just within these first 3 paragraphs. All right. So feature stories, what we're transitioning to, you're going to also begin your feature story, which will be the next video, and we'll talk about that. Don't forget, you should, if you have not completed it already, complete that press release exercise you started last week. That's due this week. And then I have read the example of a profile story. So let's go over here and take a look at what's in your homework folder, and then also the due dates. You see I have your profile stories being assigned, chapters 10 and 17, the quiz, which will be next week. You could do it now. It's open now, but this is going to be due within the next 2 weeks. Let's take a look at our due dates. Just as a quick refresher here. So let's see. We just started this week. You just handed in your hard news. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot to talk about this too. Let's back up here. I also put this line here, and this is important. Review the feedback I give you for your hard news story. So you all turned in your hard news stories. I should have feedback for all of you by the end of this week. In fact, I'm going to change that. I'm not going to should. I will have feedback to all of you by the end of this week. And the feedback you'll see right within the document in your that you submitted on Blackboard. So take a look at my feedback I give you. I know this first story, there's going to be a lot of issues. There always are, because a lot of times it's your first time doing this, right? And it's a different way of writing. So I give you lots of feedback. I can't always get as in-depth as I want with writing, so if you're still confused by something, message me and we can figure it out. I could go more in-depth or answer your questions. But a big piece of this week is I want you to really make sure you take a look at my feedback and understand what you did incorrectly and understand how you can improve, because I go more lenient on the first one for sure, a little harder on the next one, which will be your feature story. And then for your final story, that's what I'm really expecting, that you guys have a good grasp on this, and I'm going to be grading it much stricter, which we'll talk about when we get there. But the point is, it's foundational, and I want you right now for this first assignment that you turned in to take it as a learning exercise and to understand, the edits and the critique that I make. So take the time to actually look at the critique and make sure you understand it. All right, now we can go back to the due dates here. All right, so you turned in your hard news story, your AP mistakes, which I will also, you'll see what you got wrong in chapter 7 and 8. So your press release is the only thing that is due actually this week. So on the 16th, your press release has to be due. That was the assignment that was given out last week. Then the following week are the chapters that are assigned for this week. So again, you got 2 weeks to get those chapter quizzes done. And then the profile story will be done with 2 weeks, which is in the next video. So that's what you got coming up here up the pipeline. Okay, that should cover everything in this video. I'm going to go over the feature story in the next video. But of course, as always, if you have any questions about this week or any of the feedback that I give you, please let me know.